Well, before going on, I want to thank Chris very much and Panel 1. The concept of bringing weather data to you folks so that you have more tools, more arrows in your quiver, as it were, is incredibly important to us. And toward the end, I'll be talking a lot about next steps. But at this point, I'm pleased to introduce Panel 2. And before I do that, for those of you who have worked closely with the disaster response, disaster preparedness community, you know that these folks are true heroes. Kevin Niedermeyer, who will come up to the podium in just a moment, and I were comparing notes. And this is, in fact, actually we have two gentlemen who are up on the stage today who were first responders after 9/11, and so I'd like to ask for a round of applause for them, please. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Kevin Niedermeyer, Head of Emergency Management for Livingston County and President of the New York State Emergency Management Association, who will chair our next panel on emergency response to severe weather and will introduce our panelists. Kevin?
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. The next panel is set. Emergency managers from cities and counties across and from Western New York to Schoharie and the city of Oneida that we're going to talk about. These individuals are a lot of times just single man or person offices with very limited staff as well as limited resources to be able to draw from, but make a very significant impact in time of need to the community. Our first panelist I'd like to introduce is going to be Chris Baker from the Cattaraugus County Office of Emergency Management. Chris had a previous career of serving his community and his county for 22 years as a deputy sheriff and retiring from that position in the investigative position. Chris then crossed over to emergency management and was appointed the director of emergency management for Cattaraugus County. He's been serving in that position approximately 7 years today, so congratulations on that milestone. In 2009, in August, Chris experienced a flood of magnitude that he'll review to you shortly. But think about this for a minute when Chris is talking about that this village that was impacted actually sat in 4 independent towns collectively and between 2 counties. So just think about the political machine that was at work at that point in time. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Chris Baker from Cattaraugus County. Chris?
Thank you. The word's still out whether I'm real happy about taking this job. I took 1 day off and took this job as a part-time job, and it's turned into something a little bit more than what I anticipated, but I'm glad that I did. As Kevin alluded to, this storm that happened for us in 2009 was up in the village of Gowanda and a good portion of my county. The village of Gowanda gets the notoriety because that happened to be the first place that everybody went to, majority of the devastation, so it's kind of like our Katrina, but they've kind of forgot the outskirts, and you'll see in some of the slides the other impact that happened within the county. So for us, it was our 500-year event. It was just about a little over a year or so that I took office in the job, and I guess I was either blessed or not blessed, depending on how you look at it, and we'll talk about these things. So what happened up to a 24-hour period, we had prior a lot of rain going on in the area. We had some saturated ground, had moved through the system, the soil was already saturated. That day in particular, I was up at Watkins Glen working the race, and the race happened to be canceled because of a severe thunderstorm, and that had to be pushed out until Monday. I'm getting all kinds of calls from home, little weather going on back and forth. I left Watkins Glen, drove home in the sunshine, blue skies, not thinking a thing. I went home and had dinner, went to bed. I got a phone call from the fire chief in Gowanda and said, you got to get up here. We got water issues. We got about 4 feet of water running down through Main Street. I woke up. My wife says, where are you going? I'll be back in a little while. Got a little water problem up in Gowanda. 36 hours later was my first time coming back home after I was just out for a short period of time. So we've been hit rather dramatically. In the slide up here, from what we were told from the National Weather and our updates going on here, There were 3 storms that landed on top of each other and lined up perfectly, right one on top of the other. You'll see by the graphs in the areas of the amount of devastation, you'll see Walnut Creek and Silver Creek and our other Thatcher Brook is one of our bigger areas. Here's Erie County up in here. It's the Cat Creek and the Thatcher Brook are the biggest areas of what we had as far as where our water, which encircled the entire village of Gowanda. 3 storms landed on top of each other at that time frame. Over 7 inches worth of rain in less than a 3-hour period that hit us. I was blessed, I guess. I don't know, but going on from there with everything else that happened during that day. You can see on the hydro page, it gives you an indication of what it was prior to that at 2 feet, and shortly up in less than 12, 14 hours, we're up almost up to 14 feet going on for that time. As fast as it came, as fast as it went away. The amount of devastation that went on there for that last day and a half when that storm came in there. It created a huge nightmare for us, obviously. When I was to respond to that scene, I could not see the hood of my truck going from there. And Gowanda is 60 miles from my home, one way. So it was a hellacious ride. And I also had to worry about response plans while I was driving there because my counterparts in Chautauqua County were getting just as hammered as I was. So I couldn't call them for resources. Allegheny County, which is next door to me, was happening the same way. So I was able to call my buddy up in Wyoming County and say, Tony, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I need your help. I need you to get here. Just get me some storm units, get me some guys. It's bad. And he wasn't devastated at all, so he tried to come over, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So the hydro page kind of shows you what's going on here. This is the village of Gowanda, obviously the Cat Creek, all the way down, Thatcher Brook, which is the 2 big tributaries for here. Tri-County Hospital built right smack in the center of the heart of all this stuff. Great planning, huh? A few other things that are going on from there. I see some people shaking their head. You'll see in a little bit here what nightmare the hospital created for us while we're out there. Like Kevin says, Erie County, it borders on Erie County. Half the village is in Cattaraugus County. The other half is in Erie County. It's surrounded by 4 townships, which also off the town of Perrysburg, Dayton, South Dayton, and the village of Gowanda and the town of Gowanda. So that creates a huge issue for us. This is the flood inundation map. Again, here's the heart of the village of Gowanda and the inundation map that was done. That's a good almost 3/4 of the village itself. Inside that village also is the entire infrastructure for the village. The entire infrastructure. We lost also police department. We lost the village hall, all the records. We lost water, sewer. There was and you'll see one of the photos up here, the entire reservoir we lost. We lost businesses downtown. We lost the DPW garage. The main facility with all the equipment in there was gone. The fire department we lost with their trucks because they were submerged underwater doing rescues. We almost lost 2 of them over the bank because the wall of water that came off the hill almost pushed the truck into the water. So they had to be taken out of service based on the insurance. So we had to take care of fire coverage for them and to be able to do that. So we lost the entire infrastructure on there. We had 1 restaurant in the other entire town that was not shut down. Plus the hospital was also a fully functional 2-story hospital that was fully functional. It was operational at the time of the flood. We also lost that during that time. This is a satellite image, which also gives you the overflow from that storm out into the lake. So it kind of gives you how much water we had inside the village that pushed back out there. This is off the tributaries coming off those creeks and pushing out through there. It kind of gives you a pretty good idea from the satellite view up on how much water we did have within inside of our area. Again, with the response we had as of August 9th, we were overrun with 9/11 with our calls. On August 10th, we had probably 10,000 plus utility customers within our county and on the border side of Erie County on top of that because of the rising water. Like I said, as fast as they came in, as fast as they went out. When I got there, I looked right at Main Street, and there was 4 feet of water just rushing down Main Street like Class 5 rapids. And Gowanda is also known for doing its whitewater rafting and canoeing out there on the creek beds out there. I don't know if anybody would have dared to go out there that day. Actually, what happened was it ended up cutting us off. The fire chief and the police chief were on the opposite side of the river, brand new river that was just created, by Mother Nature, and how do we get to each other? We can't. So we decided to divide the village up. I took care of the rescues on my half, and they took care of my nerves until we could get something to get us across the water so we could marry up and be able to go on from there. So the village of Gowanda, we talked about it, infrastructure, damage to the facilities, again, to the majority of the roads, and again, the surrounding systems, the water system. The water system was huge. We lost the water and sewer system. We also lost the reservoir, which was 4 million gallons of pristine water that was also devastated because the water that rolled off the hill came down and pushed that also into the village, on top of everything else, to try to be able to push that out of there. Again, the village hall, all the records, everything else that's going on there, getting ready for tax season, all those other kind of things that are out there. Total devastation. The police department, patrol cars, all their body armor, all their equipment, all their records, everything else with that was gone. A few other things again, and with the hospitals. So on the morning of the 10th, we started to do as far as the reports of the road damage. This is just one of many. Below this roof was what was left over of the roof of the house. The rest of the house is gone. This truck doesn't belong there. It came from somebody else's. We've had campers that are 5 miles down the road. We have a gentleman which is a good friend of mine in a barn that had a Cadillac that was pushed, an old style Cadillac that was pushed to the ceiling, a 22-foot ceiling in his barn that was lifted right up off the ground and stuck in the rafters. That was kind of a cool picture to have. Wanted to stay away from it just in case it fell down, but it was a very interesting picture and understand with the power of water. Unfortunately, during this storm, we had 2 deaths. One was attributed to a gentleman that decided to step outside to see, didn't know what was going on out there, got swept away. We had another individual that died of a heart attack only because we could not get to them. We could not get to them because of the devastation. Our ambulances would not be able to get there. 4-wheel drives couldn't get us to where we needed to go. And it's an unfortunate situation. Several helicopter rescues in the middle of cornfields with people with water up to just below their chins to be able to pluck them out and be able to do that. So it was a very interesting evening as this all started out. Again, we ended up going up from the county EOC and moving up our EOC up into the Gowanda Middle School, which was one of the areas in the village because it was too far away for us, 13 miles away from the village of Gowanda where our EOC is. We needed to have our EOC right operational, right up inside the heart of what was going on up there. The purple lines that are on this map, this is the map of Cattaraugus County, the purple lines and the red lines means the amount of devastation throughout the county within Cattaraugus County, the amount of roads that were damaged or destroyed. And the damage on the purple lines were at least 50% or better of the roadways that had the amount of damage that were on there. It wasn't just a little bit of a shoulder or a little bit of a pothole. It was some kind of just destruction on that that was almost making it impossible. You look up at the upper border up here, which borders up into Erie County and up into our other counties up here for Wyoming County. When I said earlier about the response plan, I had Wyoming County coming up here. Wyoming County couldn't get to us because the roads were destroyed and were gone. So they had to take another path the long way around to go into Erie County and come up around the long way, which delayed on the response, which created a huge amount of problems for us to start getting our assets to be able to get here. Again, I couldn't get my assets from here in Chautauqua because they were already being impacted. Same way with my counterparts over here in Allegheny County, they were being impacted. So I needed my resources from Erie County and Wyoming County were my first groups to come in. So 28 out of 32 of my county, or my townships in my county were affected from the storm. It was a $50+ million damage storm just for us. Our damage from our storm was set the tone for the entire state. We met the threshold for the entire state at $24.2 million. We already had that in a matter of hours. So they use our storm to get the federal declaration and get the information and the information back for the federal declaration. And with 8 days in from the time that our storm happened, it was on President Obama's desk to have it signed for federal declaration for DR 1857. That's pretty good work, but we didn't factor in on the president's vacation in Hawaii, the 2 weeks. So we had to wait that time in order for him to come back and sign our declaration. So we didn't get that going on too much. So water supply, this is the $4 million gallon reservoir that's on here. This is, well, I gotta get the pointers going on here. On this side here was the pristine side of this. This is one of the well houses that's over here. It's pretty much blast proof. There's not even a scratch on this thing over here. I think it was a broken door handle. It was on anything else. The water came from up on this end here, coming off the hill, came down through and pushed all this on through. The village is down below here. This is all the remnants from what's back in here. If you get up on here, you can start seeing the tree line and the mud line that's coming up here and how high and how much water was pushing down off the hill on both sides over that. In 6 months after this storm happened, that reservoir was back to its pristine condition. Okay? There was a heck of a lot of work that was being done to take and dredge that out and put that back in there. But all that came back down into the village on top of that. There's a little bit of a drain that comes down through there. It's all supposed to funnel down on this. Didn't even make it through there. Push right over the banks. Be able to kick over there. So on top of my night, if everything else is going on, I get a call on my cell phone at 2 o'clock in the morning that the hospital needs to have a full evacuation. For an emergency manager, that's a nightmare. We go to classes, we learn about that stuff, thinking it's never going to happen to us. I wasn't there 3 hours. I got a full hospital that needs to be evacuated. Now, how am I going to get there? How am I going to do this? Because our roads are devastated, staff can't get there. I go, please tell me how many people are non-bedridden. All of them are not, which is a great thing. So I have 85 patients I need to take out of there. We had a plan in place that was already done with their school buses, and being able to push them out with the school buses. We needed to get staff in to move them because that is also a drug rehab facility also, and a psych center for us also. So it was a combination thereof. So we needed to make sure the staff was there to get them on the bus. So we got the staff in there, we went and got them on the bus, and 8 hours later, we locked the doors on the hospital and had everybody evacuated and pushed them to another facility to be able to get out of there. So the plan did work on that. Now, for the hospital also became a huge nightmare, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But as you'll see, again, most of our devastation is the muck and crap that came down from the hills and everything else. That's the biggest part of most of the storms, is the muck and the devastation. We'll be there for a long period of time. And if you don't get to it fast enough, we all know what happens to it. It all hardens up, and then it turns like into concrete. So that ends up being our problem. Again, we talked about the damage from Gowanda itself with the FEMA declaration. Again, it's 1857 for us. Again, 8 days on the president's desk, again, which was a feat in itself. For those of us that have gone through this, we know how much work that is put into this. So on the cleanup side, again, typical devastation on the right-hand side, just so we have. National Guard played a huge, huge role for us. We were able to get that in the National Guard, bring in the Army groups, the engineering groups in there, with the loaders, with the dump trucks. We have a mutual aid agreement within the county. We got every town and village that was not devastated by this that were able to give us the equipment of loaders and trucks and suck vac trucks and sweepers and all that other kind of stuff to be able to push out there. We had the caravans in there. We locked the streets down, and we went to business and be able to put these towns and villages back into service. So the military played a huge role for us based on what our cleanup efforts were needed to be. Again, our estimate's about 36 million. It kind of goes up to almost to 50 million by the time you put everything together. Again, based on the per capita. Our storm was in 2009. We still are fighting today to get our money back. We still have money that's owed to us due to our declarations that are out there. So this isn't over in just a year or 2 or 3 years. It's going on for a long period of time. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Didn't want to really screw everything up for you, but I'm here to tell you for real that it takes a little period of time about being able to push that out there. Individual assistance, again, everybody has these type of things that going on, total devastations, going on here, pushing houses off the foundations or uninhabitable, have to condemn them. They're not salvageable. People don't like to see that red sticker put on their homes, but we did. We had code enforcement teams come in here. We had them survey 782 homes. I think 100 of them were deemed inhabitable, and I think we ended up tearing down at least 20 of them once they were revisited again and seeing what they were able to do. So there was a lot of things that were going on over there. 1,400 applicants in the 3 counties. Again, gives you some idea of some quick facts and figures of what we did and how we did it and what the average award was based on that. So going back to the hospital, not only having the hospital being put out of service, I only have 2 hospitals in my county. They're 60 miles apart, okay, in my county. So for having injuries or things of that nature, during the storm, helicopters couldn't land, ambulances couldn't find ways around for the roads. It was a nightmare for us. Now take this out of here, everything else that was going on creates another huge problem for us. Services are not there. We have to travel farther, at least another hour in each direction in order to take our people there and to be able to do that. One of the other things that happens on this is all the medical records are in this facility. They still had paper records. 50,000 patient records that were submerged in the basement, which creates another huge nightmare for us because we have 50,000 people's lives are in our hands based on their medical records, so what are you going to do? So we had to come up with a plan. We had to come up with a plan to retrieve the records. And we learned from Katrina that you have 72 hours from the time they're submerged to be able to salvage the records in ink, dip them, freeze dry them, ship them to Texas, and they'll be able to retrieve the information off those records. So we're getting down to crunch time. We're down to like hour 60. We're trying to do the plans. We're working with DEC, EPA, everybody else to get us the permits to be able to get in there and do that. We came up with a plan with hazmat. We had 40 hazmat specialists, 40 team members up there. We were able to retrieve 25,000 records that were taken off the ground, submerged, being able to pack it, ship it to Texas. The other 25,000 happened to be up a little bit higher that really weren't damaged. Plus, we were really tired. We had already been on about a 40-hour binge already, and this plan came up. We were given the approval that night. We'd already been on like 30 hours, so we're down to the crunch time. We actually pulled them out on the 72nd hour to be able to get those out of there. We were given $18 million for an award to build a new hospital. We were all happy about that. That hospital is not going to be rebuilt. They chose not to rebuild the hospital. It is a green space as it stands right now. All the services that are there, they ended up building an urgent care within the village, which still doesn't help me on the emergency management side and the EMS side because urgent cares can't take the ambulances. So we still have to transport. So we're still down to one hospital inside my county. So it ends up being a huge issue. What this did was made everybody else's eyes open in the districts and within the counties with their hospitals on evacuation plans. Nobody ever thought this was ever going to happen, but it truly did happen. We know this firsthand. You'll see some of it, water lines and that for the hospital itself. All the mechanicals, where do you think all the mechanicals were? In the basement. In the basement. The backup generator, the backup fuel stores, everything else, power, everything else was there. It was all in the basement. So it becomes a huge problem. So we talk about this as far as what our numbers are for 84,000 people within the county. Again, $18 million facility. Well, there's a site already spec'd out, everything else. They've chosen not to build the facility. That's the private company that owns the hospital. Where they had the original site, Noah's Ark, probably wouldn't have saved us if it would to get that high. That's how high up they were looking for it outside the village. And the highest portion of my county, that's where they decided to build. They were going to build it. So there was going to be no chance of this ever to flood again. Definitely being outside the flood zone, and obviously this slide's a little old because within 2 years is what we had planned to open this. An idea of some reported damages throughout the county. Again, these are some of the reports that we got off the 911 system and some of the things we physically went and followed back up on, and just to break it down into the towns and villages on those. And those are just some very minor details in one of the initial reports based on that as far as the number of damages. And that was following up with 911 phone calls, making sure that somebody followed up with them and based on the pictures and having the packages together for FEMA and everything else that was going on from there. Again, some of the stats that we like to keep, because some of them are some pretty amazing numbers. Almost 38,000 meals that were served out to us. Almost a million bottles worth of water that was pushed out to us. Because obviously on top of everything else between all the rain, it was like 95 degrees and about 152% humidity. Why not, right? So we might as well push that out. So we did all those other things that were out there. 12,000 fire department hours based out there. We had 117 agencies that came and helped us during the storm within the county based on fire and EMS and law enforcement and all the other outside agencies that were out there. Again, with all the cleaning supplies, almost 40,000 hours worth of volunteer hours that we're able to push out there on top of this. Like I said, we lost the DPW barns. We had a backup DPW barns, which with 3 days later burned up with all the backup supplies that were on there, and it was attributed to the weather. It got into the electrical panel, caused a short out situation, which created a nightmare. And also during this time, trying to get schools back into, because it was getting really close when school was going to start. Are we going to open them? Or are we not going to open them? We need to get the schools open to get some type of normalcy back to the kids and not having to be around there for that part of the summer to see what's going on. So those were just some other things that we were dealing with based on that. Again, this is my good friend's house over here. It's Senator Schumer happened to visit out here. One of his devastation across there is a creek bed that goes across there, and there's a bridge. He drives over the bridge, over the creek, from the state road on the bridge to his house. He's done it for 50, 60 years without a problem. This storm happened. Nobody's going to fix this bridge. The state didn't want anything to do with it because so-called private property kind of thing or whatever, but they maintained it. They did it all prior to that and going on from there. But this is the gentleman that had the Cadillac sitting up in his barn going on from there. Now he lives across the street in a double wide because he was not going to be made whole based on this. Okay? Thank you very much. Sir, you going to do this afterwards? Hold your question for afterwards. I guess we're going to do that afterwards, okay?
As Chris indicated, we'll do questions and answer at the end of the panel discussion. Right now, at this time, I'd like to introduce Colleen Fulford from Schoharie County. Colleen is the Emergency Management Coordinator for Schoharie County Office of Emergency Services, where she's worked there since 2008. Her responsibilities include planning, training, exercise, providing situational awareness, and EOC management. Prior to this, she worked from 2006 to 2008 for Adjusters International as a disaster recovery consultant, writing public assistance grants, conducting individual assistant preliminary damage assessments for such clients as the Office of Emergency Management at the state level, the City of Marble Falls in Texas, and the City of DeBary, Florida. Colleen joined New York State Floodplain and Stormwater Managers Association in 2009 and became a certified floodplain manager in 2011. She was elected Region 4 Director for the association in 2011 and is currently serving her second two-year term. Colleen brings a very unique perspective to the field by living in an actual floodplain and experiencing the effects of a disaster on a first-hand basis. Colleen?
Hi, everybody. So we've had a huge day so far, full of all of the experts. How many's on technical overload? I'm going to make things kind of simple for you. I want to kind of try and put it on in layman's terms here. So, as Kevin said, I started with the County of Schoharie in 2008. What he didn't tell you was that I started in emergency management because I actually live in a floodplain. I bought my house in 1996 after a historical flood. And at that time, they told me, you live in a 100-year floodplain. I said, I don't plan on living another 100 years. So there's no way I'm gonna flood. I'm golden. Needless to say, I was wrong. In 2005, my house flooded. I had 3 feet of water in the basement, luckily. But every time it rained, my family and I would get concerned. And when the water would reach over the embankment, we'd kind of get real nervous and take turns watching and staking out where the water was. So it's really important, I think, as an emergency manager, to know your surroundings. So how many of us, because I've heard that there's some residents here, how many actually live in a floodplain? How many of you know where the water hits when you start saying it's time to evacuate? Do you know? How much rain does it take to get that water there? It's kind of hard to tell because we're not the experts. You are. So my job is to get all of your information, the experts, to the people like myself, like these people over here that live in the floodplain. Just like car insurance, and we know accidents happen, right? floods happen. We know that. We have to train people in what to look for. So, Hurricane Irene, I'm not allowed to take vacation in August anymore because this was my second year of taking vacation in August when a disaster happened while I was on vacation. So I'm not allowed anymore. August 28th, 2011, I was on my way back from Maine and arrived home. This is my house. I checked in with the director of emergency management at the time, and we were told by National Weather Service that this was going to be a spring thaw. Okay. So, and I'm not going to bore you with the technical information yet, but we weren't overly concerned about this. It was going to hit New Jersey and potentially the city. It was going to be a spring thaw. So, as I live in the floodplain, and hopefully my fellow floodplainers have seen the National Weather Service's stream gauges. These are the stream gauges in my county. And I have 5 of them, but unfortunately, if you notice, in between this one here and this one here is a 30-mile difference. 30 miles. That's a lot. A lot can happen. There's a lot of tributaries in those areas. And the other thing is, these are my most populated areas, right here. So, we're kind of in a blind spot in our most populated areas. And it's scary. And one of the gentlemen earlier was saying that there's a 74% increase in rain events for the Northeast. That makes this picture even more scary for me. So let me take you to our preparation for Hurricane Irene. On Friday, as I was traveling back from my kind of wet vacation in Maine, National Weather Service in the very early morning predicted that we were going to get between 4 and 7 inches of rain in our area, with the potential for up to 10 inches in the Catskills. You know, when you hear potential, it's a hit or miss. Maybe, maybe not. At 7 o'clock in the morning, we were told it's going to track along the New Jersey coast. So that potential became a little bit smaller. By mid-morning, the Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Service had us cresting at 1131.8, which means absolutely nothing to you guys. To us, our historical crests, our worst case scenarios, were 5 feet below that. So, makes that potential even smaller. We weren't concerned. We weren't as concerned. So, but the small line here, or small, everybody knows when you fill a contract out, there's always that little itty bitty stuff on the bottom. The error, potential for error, is still relatively large. We're not going to worry about that. So, and to give you an example, the house that I showed you, in 1996, I had 3 feet of water on the first floor of the house. That was our worst historical flood. 2005, I had 3 feet in the basement. Not a lot. So, and that, both of those storms were 4 to 5 feet more than what we were predicting for Irene. So we weren't all that concerned. So now let's move on to Irene. Morning of Hurricane Irene, I get up and I'm out in the backyard and I'm looking at the water and I'm going, wow, that's high. Wow, that's high. Yeah, but National Weather Service is telling me Nope, don't worry about it, spring thaw. But we're gonna not crest until 6 o'clock tonight. That water's pretty high. I trusted my instincts, and I knew that something happened in the middle of the night. The storm turned, slowed down, something, but that I was not going to be looking at a good day at work. 10 o'clock, we declared a state of emergency, and we suggested that people evacuate. We did a rapid notification similar to a reverse 911 and told people that this storm was going to be similar to the 96 storm, and that if they flooded in 96, they would flood in this storm. Some people left, some didn't. 11:30, I was on the phone with Britt Westergaard in Albany, saying, Britt, how much more rain are we looking at? Don't worry about it. Prattsville gauge, it's crested. You're golden. It's going to get a little bit higher, but it's okay. You guys have crested. The calls that we were receiving definitely did not suggest that the water was going to stop. It was then that Britt looked further into it and determined that our Prattsville gauge, the USGS Prattsville gauge, was no longer working. That's bad. Now, we're totally blind. We have absolutely no idea what's coming our way. So, as you can see, and I won't bore you with the numbers, we rapidly rose. 50,000. How many of you know what a CFS is? Cubic feet per second. Think of a basketball. That's 1 cubic feet per second coming out of the Power Authority's dam. We, in an hour's time, raised 50,000 CFS, 50,000 basketballs in an hour. That's unheard of. The next hour, 75,000 we increased. We didn't know if it was going to continue. 12:30, we declared a mandatory evacuation, and we blew our dam break sirens that we had trained our residents. If you hear this, the dam broke, you need to get out of harm's way. Thankfully, everyone left, and we didn't have any deaths, but we really could have. Everything changed very quickly. Oh yeah, forgot. Schoharie County, and I don't know if maybe some of you have seen this in the news, but our 911 center and our emergency operations center, jail, sheriff's office, yeah, we're in the floodplain. So while the water was rising rapidly, we had a mandatory evacuation for our emergency operations center, our 911 center. And at this point, we couldn't get to our backup EOC. So we had nowhere to go. Our residents had no way to get a hold of us. They had no idea where we were. How would you like to call 911 and have it ring? Because that's what happened in our county. We were certainly not prepared. Everything that we had done had been based on our historical levels. Our historical level was a 100-year flood, which is technically not a 100-year flood. It's a 1% annual chance of happening. It's a 26, Tom, % chance of happening in a 30-year mortgage. So this is what I came home to. My house was 175 years old, had been through a few floods. Never in a million years would I have thought that I would have had a total loss. If you can't tell, my house is 25 feet off of its foundation. And what you don't see is there's hardly anything left in the house. The water took most of it. And what I want you to realize is it wasn't just my home. And as an emergency manager, I looked at this and said, yep, I can't do anything here. And I went back to work. Because it wasn't just me. The devastation was widespread. 8.5% of our population was homeless that day. Think about what you would do if the rain that we're getting tomorrow turned into an historical event. And what you have left is what you came here with. Because many people, 8.5% of my population, went through that in one day. So, what went wrong? Everything. Anything that could have gone wrong, went wrong. Schoharie County has 7 high hazard dams. All of them experienced emergencies that day. High hazard dams are dams that will potentially cause significant damage if they're breached. Our river gauge system, the picture that I showed you with the 30-mile lapse, it's lacking. We were confident in our National Weather Service predictions because National Weather Service, their equipment's never going to fail. The equipment that they rely on from NOAA, River Center, that's not going to fail. We rely on the National Weather Service. What's the backup? What's the backup plan? We didn't have one. We don't have any modeling software that connects rain and river gauges together. Thankfully, our government is looking into that now. But it wasn't happening. The plans that we did have in place just didn't work. We planned for a historical flood, the historical flood that we knew. We didn't plan on a 500-year event. We had a 500-year event. We didn't plan on that. We planned on what we believed would be the worst case. We were wrong. And as I said, anything that could go wrong, it definitely went wrong. We were making plans for what we were seeing, only to get another curveball thrown at us. I've never seen so much go wrong. So what did we learn? As everybody here knows, we're never going to stop the water. It's gonna happen. It's gonna come. How many of you have ever been in a car accident? Did you stop driving? No. But did you drive smarter? Did you make sure that your seatbelt was on? Because you just mitigated the effects of a car accident. Do you have insurance? Did you get collision after your accident, just in case? Again, you're mitigating. You're protecting yourself. We don't stop driving. We do things smarter. We're more aware of our surroundings. We're more aware of what we're going to do if it happens. It's something that we're never going to stop. The weather's going to continue. We need to have redundant systems. Things fail. Even the things that we think are unfailable, they fail. They fail. Make sure you've got a backup. And once you have that backup, get a backup to the backup. Because we're living proof. We couldn't get to our backup. So it was difficult. We need more real-time information. We need to be able to see what's going on. Because if something fails, we don't want to be left in the dark in the middle of the night. And we need to educate the public more. How many people believe that the next layer of government is going to come and save them? We had people in Schoharie County saying, when are you going to put my house back? I need more money. Or people just believing that government will save them. And we can't have that. We need to educate our people. We need to make sure that they're trained to read stream gauges, that they have a backup plan, that they have an evacuation plan. We never wrote anything down, but I can sure tell you that my 19-year-old daughter knew exactly what to do when I wasn't home and she heard the sirens. She knew exactly what to do, and I never worried about what she was doing because I knew she was doing what she needed to. And I'd like to quote, Schoharie County has a new director of emergency services, and he's a great gentleman. His name is Michael Hartzell. He was a sergeant major with the National Guard. And we have him now, and we're thrilled to have him. But he said to me early on, "No, Colleen," he says, "everybody goes into work thinking that they're the best at their job. They do a great job. I mean, who goes into work saying, I stink at my job. I'm getting paid anyway." We all believe that the office or whatever capacity we work in will fail if we're not there. They're going to fall flat on their faces. But we know that's not true. So as you go about your jobs, all of the experts in the field, how do you know what you don't know? How do you know that something is expected of you, or that you should learn something or share some information, unless you're told? Because we're all just doing our jobs. Well, I want to challenge each and every person in here. Think outside of the box. Think about how your job or your expertise fits with the rest of the expertise in the field, or personally. Think outside of your comfort zone. Find out about things that you don't know about, or see if someone could use the information that you have, because it's important. And I'd just like to say that Congressman Tonko earlier spoke about Washington cutting our way into the future. And I want to say that it leads to a reaction. You know, sure, the government can come in and they can appropriate X amount of dollars to help us recover. But if we thought proactively, and we did invest in our future, and we created these partnerships and these redundant systems, in the long run, we're going to save money because we're not going to have to be reactive. We're going to be proactive and spend less money. Is there any questions? Oh, sorry, I forgot. Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce the Honorable Mayor Max Smith from the City of Oneida. The City of Oneida is a city of 12,000 people, and on June of 2013, they suffered a very, very severe flood that inundated their city and left over 200 homes impacted. Mayor Smith was on the council for 14 years and as deputy mayor, but on a very, very unfortunate circumstance arose in October of 2012. The current serving mayor, Don Hudson, had passed away unexpectedly, and Mayor Smith was then thrusted into the position, and 8 months later was facing one of the most severest floods that had devastated the city in its history. So with that, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Mayor Smith. Okay.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. This is about the second time I've been asked to come and speak to people who are experts in emergency management. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out why they wanted me along. But I guess it's that grassroots on the street kind of experience that we can speak to. I'm going to ad-lib a little bit, if you don't mind. There's certainly some similarities with what was discussed by the other two people on the panel. So I want to kind of focus on some things that maybe will be a little different than their experience. And also just kind of give you some random thoughts, because I've been frantically writing notes here today. And one of the things that occurred to me is, thank God we don't believe in that old adage about killing the messengers. In Oneida, 11.5 feet is our minor flood stage. And on a Thursday evening, it started raining. I knew it was raining hard, but I didn't give any thought to the idea that, of what I would be facing in the coming days. One of the things that concerned me about some of the things that they were saying is the amount of rain that precipitated the event that I dealt with was between 4 and 5 inches. Given what they're speaking about and the amounts of rain that I've heard other people talking about today, wow. I have to tell you, I need to give incredible kudos to our emergency management personnel. They weren't people that I thought about a whole lot. I've gotten to understand and know them a little bit better, and thank God for them. Thank God for the New York State emergency response teams, and frankly, for the support that this state administration has put into helping communities like mine and bringing about forums like this. I don't know what we would have done without the competent support and leadership provided by those individuals. Now, when I came here today, I thought, oh my goodness, I went through a whole lot, kind of felt sorry for myself a little bit, maybe, boy, we went through a significant event. Well, let me tell you something. Chris Baker's my hero. Wow. Because what we experienced was nowhere near what they went through. Differences. Our flood peaked at 17.5 feet. Minor flooding is 11.5 feet. So, being a mayor in a small community like mine of 12,000 is a part-time position. I got a full-time job. I'm off at work. And they call me and say, you got some flooding. Well, this is an area in my town. Oneida sits at the northern end of the county. Everything to the south is higher elevation. We're in the lake plain. And, it's been flooding in this area. We call it the flats. And it's the low end of town. It's where the lower income folks live. The houses are not of, as high a value as in some other areas of town. And I really didn't think it'd be that big a deal because it always kind of floods in the flats. Well, when they called me up and said that the water was rising at 3 foot an hour, I got my butt back to town. When I arrived, what I saw was that entire end of town under 6 foot of water. One of the differences that I've picked up on and just hearing about things as they transpired for other people is when our water comes, it doesn't leave. Unlike the flows that come through and create all of the devastation and all of that, our devastations our houses off foundations and those kinds of things happen from kind of a percolating effect. The water's rising so fast There's a bubble effect in the house, and it's lifted up and taken off its foundations. And I saw some of the devastation of the water sweeping through. We don't get that effect. It spills over the banks, comes into low-lying areas, builds up to a level of 5-6 feet, and then sits there. Some of it will leave over time, but subsequent to that, there are still significant amounts of water that literally have to be pumped back to the creek and gotten rid of that way. So we've got a significant amount of pumping to do in low-lying areas and in basements and that sort of thing after the event. I would observe that most of the people in my flood, in that low-lying area in my community, have not embraced or probably haven't educated themselves, don't have any idea about this new paradigm that we're hearing about and that we're discussing. I regularly get people calling me and asking what I'm going to do to fix the flooding. I had a real learning experience. Once again, I was a new mayor, and people look at you as the guy who's responsible. So I'm at the head of there's a little hill in my town, a busy street goes down the hill, and the flood's lapping at the edge, and there's a group of irate citizens who are gathered at the water's edge, demanding, and irate because I won't let them go back into this flooded zone where there's still natural gas on, electricity on, and all kinds of hazards in the area, and they want to be allowed to go back to their homes. So I'm going to talk some sense to them, get them to calm down and tell them that we will allow them back in as soon as it's possible, and I'm going to let them listen to reason. So I stood on a chair and began to address the crowd. Oh my goodness. I thought, I don't get off this chair pretty soon, I'm going to be a casualty. It was a real education in how to deal with people whose lives, and I get it, I understand their passion and how upset they were because their lives have been turned completely upside down. And they're frustrated and they're distraught and they're concerned. As we go forward, my concern is, I'm being told that's going to happen with greater frequency. We haven't gotten over certainly even close to the last event. Like I said, people think that, that there's a fix of some kind, that if we just build bigger levees or wave a magic wand or dig out the stream bed or, I've heard all kinds of things brought forth, that suddenly there'll be no more flooding and everyone's going to be fine. One of the things that we struggle with in this particular area is it's not an area where the homes have sufficient value where there's an economic incentive to do things like build higher or raise those houses up. The average home value in this region probably doesn't hit $70,000. So when you look at the cost of raising a structure like that 5 or 6 feet, it's not an economically viable option. One of the things that is similar to them, and it's shocking to me, we also have our ambulance service, our Department of Public Works, our water department, and our sewer treatment plant all in the flood zone. And yes, they were all devastated. So one of the things that we're already looking at is how do we relocate some of those things out of the flood area. In total, we had about 232 structures impacted by this. 32 of those structures were businesses. I'll give you we were really, really very fortunate in that this occurrence took place in the morning, on a Friday morning. We began to notice that we were going to have some problems at about 8 o'clock. All of my staff was coming to work and were ready and willing and there to have an immediate impact. We were fortunate we didn't have any deaths or any, major problems with people getting injured, but there was a lot of evacuations, a lot of support that came from local agencies who came in. Because we have a lake adjacent to us, there was a volunteer fire department that actually had several of those airboats that you see in the swamps. They came in with those, all kinds of different kinds of rescue vehicles. And one of our major efforts, given how fast the flood was rising and the fact that there's no early warning system or anything like that in place, which frankly, as an aside, we're now developing, we had to go around house to house and try and help people evacuate and get folks to safety because they were stranded. And we were able to accomplish that, I think, largely because of the timing. I hesitate to think what would have happened if this had taken place on a weekend or at night, for example. There's no doubt we would have probably suffered some perhaps potentially some deaths, some injuries, and that kind of thing. I think that I'm going to, stop my comments there. The responses, I have to also, give some recognition to all of the many agencies that came to help us out. I was really overwhelmed by the number of people who came from organizations, restaurants. One of the things that I just found so amazingly touching was we kind of waived the rules for them because they didn't apply for food permits or building permits. There was a group of 4 young men under the age of 17 who showed up day after day using their own money to buy hot dogs, burgers, sodas, and they gave free meals off the back of one of their pickup trucks at an intersection where they noticed a lot of people. And at one point, some of my county health people tried to get involved. Guys, give them a break. We're in an emergency situation, and this is an inspiring thing that they're doing. An event like this brings out the best in people, and it brings out the worst in people. I'm a guy whose glass is always half full, so I look at this event and I take away from it, what are the positives that potentially came out of this? And for me, it was that people who, we built relationships, neighbors who probably hadn't spoken to each other in years in some cases, individuals from some of our upper crust neighborhoods, found the occasion to go down and work in a place that they would never, probably hadn't visited in years. And so there were, our community, if you could say such thing, actually in many ways improved as a result of this horrible tragedy. And now we're spending our time trying to decide how do we move forward when a significant portion of our community lies in the flood zone, and the prognosticators and the experts are telling us we're going to see more of these kinds of events. So how do I as a mayor now, plan for the future and relocate a significant portion of my population and my businesses to other areas? And then what do I do with what's left? In the dead of night, I awoke one night, I thought, I know, we'll flood the whole area and I'll be able to sell beachfront property. But I don't think that's going to be a viable alternative for me. So we do continue to face some real challenges. Probably 25 or 30 of the structures that are still there are not habitable, and we're faced with how do we get these structures, demolished and torn down and those kinds of things. So we've certainly got plenty of work to do. A significant portion of money has actually flowed already, which I'm pleased about, but there's much more to get in hand, and we're going to move forward in a spirit of cooperation and mutual support to rebuild from this disaster as best we can. But certainly as an elected official, I am not the National Weather Service hydrologic river meter thing is now a favorite on my home computer. And every time it rains, it could be 1 o'clock in the morning, the wife said, where are you going? I'm going down to check the creek level. And it just seems that, I don't know whether I'm anxious or whether I'm noticing it more, but just 2 weeks ago, it rained a little bit. Seemed like a little bit to me, maybe I was sleeping soundly. The next morning I checked, we're already at moderate flood stage. And people's nerves are raw, and they're gathering on the bridges, looking and saying, Mayor, should we evacuate? What should we do? And I said, well, it appears to be going down now, but obviously this is in the forefront of our minds. And I got to tell you, I'm pretty concerned with what I'm hearing when I'm hearing about frequencies, and we're still raw and really haven't healed from the last event. But I'm very appreciative that it is receiving attention and that at least a small-town mayor like myself can get good information to make sound decisions moving forward. So, thank you.